as good of a matchup as you could ask for Baylor. And I'm not sure that Baylor is the team that like wins the whole thing this year. I do think there's some upside to them, but like I don't really know that they're like a Final Four team. So they're probably a great survivor pick because I'd be shocked if they don't get through Colgate. But again, you probably won't use them like come like Elite Eight or Final Four. So no, Press, I'm all about that for survivor. And listen, like, so this is a client play for me. I wasn't going to hold out on you guys. The first one I gave was like kind of more of an opinion. This is a 4% play. I laid it with Baylor, laid 13.5. I think this probably goes off more like 14.5, maybe even 15. I think Baylor covers every number. I'll actually be surprised if this is anything other than a 20-plus point Baylor win. The reason I kind of come up with that number of 20 is last year's Colgate team, in my opinion, was much better than this year's by a wide margin, and I'll get into why in a minute. But last year, Colgate was a 15 seed. They played Texas. They lost by 20. This year's Colgate team is a 14 seed because of some of the 1 seeds that lost. But they're far worse than they were last year, and this is not a good matchup for them. So it's hard to believe that Baylor does anything worse than what Texas did to them last year. And so I think it's going to be a 20-plus point win. Colgate, they played 2 opponents that are roughly sort of similar caliber opponents to Baylor this season. They were back earlier in the year. It was Illinois and Arizona. They lost those games by 17 and 27 respectively. So there's precedence for Colgate, this Colgate team, also getting blown out by some of the high major teams. And you know, I came on this show and talked this show, the college basketball show, my own sort of spaces. I've been talking about Colgate all year. The Colgate University is right down the street from where I live. It's only like 25 minutes away. I've been to, see them a couple times in person, went to the Patriot League final last week. I really thought this was going to be the year that Colgate took a step back and either didn't win this league or didn't win the Patriot League tournament. And it wasn't. And the reason that it wasn't is because the rest of the Patriot League was so poor this year. The league collectively was so much worse that Colgate was still the best in that league by a mile, even though this is probably the worst Colgate team I would say that they've had in probably 5 years. Like of any point of this sort of quote unquote dynasty that they've had, I really believe this is the worst of any of those teams. Now, big reason for that, Tucker Richardson graduates, Oliver Lynch-Daniels graduates, 2 very experienced excellent guards that were great on both ends of the floor. And it kind of turned Colgate into like they can't really play with their optimal like lineup anymore. Reason for that is like the good players they have, 2 of them are both bigs. Jeff Woodward, Keegan Records, they're both like 7-footers. So that's great in the Patriot League when no one has size. But it slows them down. It's going to be brutal for them against a Baylor team that it will light you up from the 3-point arc. So I think Colgate's going to have a really tough time defending Baylor. They're one of the highest efficiency 3-point shooting teams in the country. Just feels like a spot where Baylor runs them out. So I laid it. I would lay any number, 4% play, Baylor Bears.
So we're talking about an early start, neutral site game in Nashville, Tennessee, where I can't imagine Baylor's going to have a whole lot of crowd support. I worry about the juice for the Bears in this one, in that opener. Do they come? I mean, we're talking about laying doubles. Baylor hasn't even been a double-digit favorite since the start of conference play. And now they're laying doubles. They have to win by margin. And I worry about, is this going to be a low-energy game for the Bears? Given that early start, given the neutral court, does that concern you at all for this one? Certainly, I wouldn't talk you out of Baylor. Baylor's on my short list as well. But I'm worried about that particular aspect of the game.
Yeah, I mean, the early start time is always tricky, Teddy, but like they would have to shoot so poorly from 3, in my opinion, to not cover this game. Not just not win this game, to not cover this game, that I'm willing to, like, I'd be willing to take my chances with, like 10 minutes of sort of blah play from Baylor. Colgate was in this spot a couple of years ago. I think they played Arkansas and were up like 15 before Arkansas ran them out by 20 plus. So there's also, kind of precedence for that happening in the way they play. Colgate's really just kind of given up the 3 all year because not many of these Patriot League teams can hit the 3. But if they don't do that, like Baylor's gotten a little bit better on the inside. Their guards, even though they don't have a great post player, Yves Missy has been a lot better. He's a freshman with a huge upside. I think he could dominate in the paint. And the Baylor guards are just going to, like I said, no Tucker Richardson, no Oliver Lynch-Daniels, no one to cover those Baylor guards that can get right to the hoop. So no matter how you slice it, it's just hard to see Baylor not scoring a bunch of points and winning this one I'll call it by 20 at least.